Hi, welcome to this week's Life Group lesson in the Epic series. I'm Pastor Jeff Hamilton at Hills Church. I'm so glad that you've gathered together to be able to grow together. That's kind of been our theme during this small group, this Life Group campaign, as we spend these 7 weeks together digging deeper into the stories that we're studying on Sunday morning. It really is a true dynamic that we grow better together when we share the journey with each other and take that next step. So glad that you've joined, whether you're in a home or whether you're at the Commons or whether you're in some other location watching this at home, on the computer or on the TV. Pray that it'll be a great time together. And this week's lesson, this week's story was a phenomenal one as well. For Mother's Day, we opened the book of Ruth. Now, the book of Ruth takes place chronologically during the book of Judges, as it says in verse 1 of chapter 1. And even though the book is named after her, and Ruth is one of the primary characters, one of the things we forget is that this really is Naomi's story, Ruth's mother-in-law, who experienced all kinds of loss, having to move from her hometown to a foreign country, there losing her husband and her 2 sons, and with nothing left and with no other options, having to kind of return home to start life all over again. You know, when things like that happen in our life, it feels like God has abandoned us. In fact, that's even what Naomi says. Why has God turned against me? You know, there's probably a time in each one of our lives where we have felt that same thing. But God never abandons us. What tends to happen, though, in our lives when we face these overwhelmingly challenging circumstances is that we stop holding on to the promise and we start holding on to our circumstances. Instead of getting better, we become bitter. In fact, that's the very thing that happens to Naomi. She says, stop calling me by my name, Naomi, which means pleasant, but instead call me Mara, which means bitter. Because, man, when bitterness begins to take hold in our hearts, then we lose all kinds of hope for what future can be, for what God's future is for us. We always do have a choice that you can become bitter or we can become better. You know, the only difference is when you take out the I out of bitter, that you have the ability to really be able to move forward. You know, moving forward so many times just really means, even if it's starting over and going back to the beginning, we think that it's a step backwards. But oftentimes, God is just repositioning us around an obstacle so that we can get to the place that He really wants us to be. See, God's plan is whatever has been lost, whatever has been sacrificed in our life, that He is going to redeem that. He is going to restore those things. But what requires something of us? It requires us to humble ourselves. In Naomi's case, to kind of go back home and to start from scratch. In Ruth's case, to become like a beggar, and she heads out to glean on the edges of the field, taking whatever leftover and whatever goodwill is left by her from the local farmers. But in the midst of that, through Ruth's humility, to just go out and do whatever is necessary to keep moving forward, to keep persevering, God was at work. She finds herself gleaning in the land of Boaz, who happens to be a relative whom God uses not only to redeem Ruth and Naomi's future, but also to become her husband and to set an entire new course for her life. See, when Naomi is willing to start over, as Ruth humbles herself, we see that the things that seem to have been lost, God redeems, God restores. In fact, Naomi, the one who seemingly had lost everything, becomes great-great-grandmother to the greatest king of Israel in David. See, we never know what God has down the road. But if we stay in our bitterness and our brokenness, there is no hope. But when we persevere and we humble ourselves, God has great things in store as He begins to unfold His promise to us. God wants to do that in your life. He is a redeemer and a restorer. Let him be that to you today. Think about the things that God's promised you and the things that seem to be cast aside and lost forever. And start to believe again that as we do the simple things, as we humble ourselves, it's not starting over. God is helping us to start fresh so that he can unlock his life and his future and his purpose in us. Hope you enjoy your discussion tonight, and just encourage each other that this is not a time to be bitter, but God is doing pleasant things in your life. God bless you.